Greetings, citizens! Just a Guy has arrived. It's been a while since I've posted much on this YouTube channel of mine, much in terms of proper videos anyway, and that's mostly because I've been chasing my longtime dream of visual novel development instead, something I talked about at length in March when I was playing Bomberman Max. For anyone who cares, I'll just say I've learned a lot since then and have continued working, but I don't imagine you do care, and more importantly, this video has nothing to do with that, and this is all just something of a prologue to what I'm actually going to be talking about today, that being just visual novels. If you haven't heard yet, here is a rundown of what's happened over the past, well, just day or so. Valve, or Steam, or whatever you want to call them, has been sending out notices to various developers and publishers of visual novels, informing them that they need to fix their games up or they're going to be removed from Steam. These notices have gone out not only to just small developers whose games may have only just released, but even to developers whose games have been sitting on the store for years. Now, while this list has been growing considerably over just the past day alone, right now it consists of the following titles: Honeypop, or Honeypop, I never get that one, Re-Lord 1, Kindred Spirits on the Roof, Mutiny, Roommates, Battle Girls, Galaxy Girls, and Tropical Liquor. Additionally, another visual novel, Kiss for the Petals, was removed earlier this year, which was at first thought to be something of a weird one-off thing, and now seems to have just been the first of many of these instances. And as I said, while some of these titles were recent additions to Steam's store, others, like I said, have been on there for years. Perhaps the most noteworthy of these titles is Honeypop, a game that released onto Steam roughly 3 years ago, has been featured in numerous Steam sales, was featured in at least one Humble Bundle, I think, was nominated for last year's Steam Awards alongside some other indie games you probably haven't heard of, like, I don't know, The Witcher, Mount and Blade, and Rust. Yeah, you get the idea. And most of all, it's a game that just about every Let's Player out there, especially back during its release window, which was again roughly 3 years ago, has played. That's Markiplier, PewDiePie, Jacksepticeye, they've all played it. So they've all, to that end, likely profited off of it as well. More than that, because of the trading card system it has in place, there's no doubt that Valve has profited from not only Honeypop, but likely all of the games that it suddenly decided to go after all at once. Of course, as I said, it's not just Honeypop or any one game that's been sent this message. It's rapidly looking like a purge of sorts, though maybe that's too extreme. Still, this is a lot to take in, and it seems like a lot is going on at once. So, where to begin? To start, let's look at the actual content of some of these games and see if it's really that bad. Well, Honeypop is a puzzle game that offers brief sexual encounters with the characters you can romance after having some dates with them. By sexual encounters, I mean you get to see the characters in states of undress on the side of the screen while you play a puzzle game with them, after which you get to see a single still image of them from the act itself. Cover your eyes, viewers. Ooh. Now, Kindred Spirits on the Roof, meanwhile, is a game about two lesbian ghosts helping girls discover and accept their sexuality. And, not in the raunchy way, but in more of a wholesome and cheesy kind of way. For the most part, when you just describe the content of these games, it's pretty tame, honestly. I'd even go as far as to say that, yeah, it is pretty tame. Because the visual novel developers and localization companies and so on who do bring over actual pornographic content know better than to put it on Steam. That's kind of a big duh right there, if you ask me. What's more, most visual novels on Steam that have adult content in their original releases have had that content removed for the releases on Steam, or at least toned down. They're usually ports of console releases of those games, as in ones that had to go through some form of a ratings board to even release in the first place before they even got to Steam. Thus, even if there may be some form of patch of adult content for stuff that was removed, the version of the game being sold on Steam is, in those cases, versions of the game which have already been deemed okay for sale. But okay, maybe that's not enough for you. Alright, well then, keeping in mind that this is Steam we're talking about, let's look at some of the other games on Steam's storefront. Outlast 2 features what is ostensibly a sex cult. There's child molestation, mass incest, mass murders, rapes, all of it, and it's all part of the plot. I don't want to actually describe what goes on and what is described in Outlast 2 in more detail than I just did, but hey, if you're curious, I did a dramatic, preachily reading of the game and stuff in another video, shameless promotion, whatever. Moving on, the Whistleblower DLC of Outlast 1, meanwhile, features a madman that graphically dismembers his victims in order to transform his fellow inmates or whatever into his wives so that he can impregnate, and I'll let you fill in the blanks. The game Hatred, meanwhile, allows you to control a character known simply as the antagonist, at which point you can go to town on a town literally just because you can. Many AAA games feature sexual content to varying degrees, some even using it as their selling points. It wasn't so long ago that games were boasting about how many sex scenes their games had because this was so new and exciting. How many characters you could romance, of what genders, and so on and so forth. Oh, everyone gets a sex scene, you get a sex scene, you get a sex scene, and you get a car! But no sex scene. For some reason. I don't know. I don't know. I feel bad, but, tough luck. You've got Mortal Kombat, known for how graphically violent it is. It's lauded for it, even. Any number of horror games, heck, just pick one out of a hat, will use and arguably even trivialize horrific events to tell their stories and shock players. I mean, Five Nights at Freddy's, which apparently a lot of kids love, is about, child murders, for goodness sake. What's more, there's also mods to take into consideration, both those on Steam and off. A lot of games, AAA and otherwise, have mods out there. Some for fun, some for, well, a different kind of fun. Those games aren't being taken off Steam just because those mods exist. In the case of games that have patches to uncensor them, I think one could at least attempt to argue that what's being done is akin to getting rid of a game because of a mod rather than because of what's actually being sold on Steam itself. Now, I don't know how successful they'd be in making that argument, but that's why I said one could make that argument rather than try to really go out and make it myself. In any case, here's the main point. Somehow, with all of this sitting on the shelves of Steam storefront, it is the games with consensual sex displayed through single still images at that are apparently being considered too graphic and in need of change. I'd like to think anyone with common sense would be asking at this point, yeah, that is weird, so what gives? I mean, it's a good question. What does give? And I admit, I'm not really the biggest proponent of porn and visual novels. If anything, I'm actually the opposite. Much as I want to make visual novels of my own, I have always been upfront, or well, as upfront as I can be to an audience of zero, that I don't really have any intention of including smut in what I make, or will make eventually, fingers crossed. I mean, I'm even in the minority that actually tells people there's nothing wrong with the all-ages versions of these titles, that you might even have a better experience with the porn cut out. Or at the very least, that you won't feel like anything's missing. See, no matter what, regardless of how I feel, I still don't feel like there's anything inherently wrong with the smut being in there. Yeah, I feel the way I do about it, but I also have a brain. I can think for myself. If it gets in the way of my enjoyment of something, I'm perfectly able to either skip through it, or if I feel like I need to, just stop playing completely and do something else with my time. And that right there is, I believe, one of the first things we really need to talk about here. For whatever reason, media critics, morality police, whatever you want to call them, there seems to be this mindset among the people that people can't think for themselves. And I mean, okay, sure, maybe some people can be dumb, but the idea that people can't think for themselves, that don't know better, that they need to be protected from fiction, from stories? If anything, that seems much more applicable to Valve right now than the developers of these games, don't you think? More than that, though, I think people in general might be becoming more and more complacent. It's like we're just giving up, or perhaps forgetting that we even have the ability to make choices for ourselves. Instead of seeing something we don't like and thinking, oh, okay, I won't continue to deal with this thing I don't need to deal with, I'll just go do something else and move on with my life. The response that's becoming more and more popular seems to be, oh, this thing I am not required to interact with in any way is something I inherently find abhorrent, and I must destroy it, and make sure anyone who supports it understands how evil they are. And, I don't want to get all political here, but this is something that is very much a both sides phenomenon, because it's a human phenomenon, really. And it's one I also wish could be toned down, if not eliminated outright. But that's probably wishing too much. I've said this many times before, but it's my belief that variety is what's most important when it comes to things like this. If you don't like something, you shouldn't want to get rid of it. No, what you should want to do is help with the creations of the things you do like. You should want to help pursue and promote what you want, what you like, what you enjoy, what you think does send the message you want to send. Heck, create those things yourself. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the popular mindset at work these days. This, despite how often you hear cries of, this is just criticism, no one wants to take da-da-da-da away. Well, no, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore, if it ever was. Now, you might be thinking, well, the reason they're taking this whole people can't think for themselves, they don't know better approach is because they're concerned about kids getting their hands on these games. Okay, fine. Kids. We'll talk about kids. You know what? That part of this whole issue extends far beyond just visual novels when you get down to it. Take YouTube's recent string of fiascos and how many of them can be boiled down to how parents were just leaving their kids in front of this device or that device with the app or the website turned on, without any attention paid to what they were actually watching until it was, too late. By the way, here's a little secret you may not have known about. If you're under 13, you're not even supposed to, and I know supposed to, but yeah, if you're under 13, you're not even supposed to have a Steam account of your own in the first place. In other words, that means you don't even really have the right to be upset that all the little Timmies in the world got exposed to all the games with the not so little, well, Seriously, it's not like we're talking about some little hidden away detail in the lengthy terms of service or anything. This is pretty darn straightforward. Basically, what that should mean is that think of the children is by default not an acceptable thing to say simply because Steam is expressly not a storefront for children. And I certainly don't think it should be right to retroactively take down games if it's decided to be one now. At what point can we seriously say that it should not be a developer or a creator's responsibility that these products get into the wrong hands, rather than the responsibility of the person who was supposed to be watching those hands in the first place? At what point can we say, without it being met with dismissal or disdain, that the content is not the problem, it's those who are allowing it into the wrong hands that is the problem? That it's these blatant double standards reinforcing these things. These ideas that, everything on here is okay except what we decide it isn't 3 years later, that's the problem. That's one of the craziest things about this. I'm not sure if it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too is the right phrase, but it's what comes to mind. Also, if we're really going to be likening all of this stuff to pornography, why is it that when an adult is caught allowing a minor to access pornography, they're considered to be the ones in trouble, that we recognize they're the one specific adult that is at fault, as opposed to the company that made or distributed whatever it was, as opposed to the person who starred in it, to the people who filmed it, all that stuff? It's almost like that makes way more sense than the way the games industry likes to tackle these things. Is it because games are seen as toys and we haven't really fully accepted that they're not anymore? Is it because the video games industry likes the double standard it has so it can control what's for sale and not? I don't know. I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty clear that, again, there are double standards at work. I mean, it's not exactly news that games like this are viewed differently than Western style or AAA games, but stuff like this just seems pretty straightforward to me. Not only are all of the games that have been hit thus far either Japanese or made in the style of Japanese games, but many are what I call popcorn games. No sign of any AAA games in the bunch. These are games that are, the snacks of the game world. Maybe they're unhealthy, but they're not games that are really bad for you or that could do any lasting damage or anything. What's more, not only does the content of these games itself, again, pretty much universally pale in comparison to the content of its counterparts in the games that have already been deemed acceptable, those counterparts being the multitude of games that as of now have not received any such warning from Steam, but that's not even only in terms of how extreme the content is, but how much is actually on display in the first place. Because keep in mind, while some of you out there might be stuck on the porn aspect of this whole situation, the other part of it is that this is porn and visual novels we're talking about. These games generally will just have still images and character sprites to work with. Maybe some sounds, but mostly it's just going to be text. It may not even have images. Nothing like the graphic corpses and full character models you're going to be seeing in big games that are apparently, again, totally fine with Steam. Also, and this shouldn't need to be said, but I want to quickly interrupt myself and say that any look at the news at any given time of day should really tell you how ridiculous any argument suggesting that violence is okay because it's obvious fantasy and not real and something you could imitate, but sexual content is much more real with consequences is and blah blah blah, come on. Now, from what I've seen, the past few years have had two things going for it in this area of media. On one side, it seems like visual novels really are starting to catch on more and more, bit by bit, outside of Japan. I do think Steam has, to its credit, been a big factor in this. I honestly wonder how successful the Muv-Luv Kickstarter would have been, heck, if there even would have been a Kickstarter for Muv-Luv in the first place, if not for Steam's success with visual novels to that point. And who's to say we would have had something like Doki Doki Literature Club, if not for the rising popularity of visual novels outside of Japan? Well, if not popularity, then infamy, but I digress. Unfortunately, at the same time, I've also seen a trend in the opposite direction when it comes to how Japanese games, or the trashy games, the popcorn games, whatever you want to call them, are being perceived. I mean, maybe even how anime and anime fans in general are perceived as well. The thing is, a few years further back, it felt like just the opposite was taking place. Like things were going into a more positive, accepting direction than that they've, well, ended up. Which, you know, should be the thing you'll want, right? Like everyone should want that. Acceptance, positivity, all that good stuff. Love thy neighbor, yada yada yada. Am I right? Now, not to get too far off topic here, but let's call it situation. One situation that sticks out in my mind is Nipponichi Software's Criminal Girls. Yeah, this may seem out of left field to you, but I have a point, I promise. See, it's a trashy game with a trashy premise. Originally, though, the PSP version of this game was deemed way too racy to have any hopes for a localization. Yet its subsequent PS Vita port and its sequel after that were both brought overseas despite how its original game was received. That is to say, it was not received at all because they thought it was too racy to be received. You get what I'm saying? However, people were quick to be outraged and throw tantrums when certain bits of content was changed or altered for the Western releases of those games. Now, you might be thinking, well, of course, they censored us, but personally, I saw and still think it was, at least then, a very good sign. You can't have everything happen overnight. When a game goes from being way too much to be localized to one that is essentially fine for localization with physical editions to be sold in stores and all, hell yeah, I'd say that was a good thing no matter what kind of game we're talking about. Mind, I'm not saying this particular game was good or that we need more games like that one specifically. That is another topic entirely, though for clarification's sake, let's just say if I were to be pressed on the matter, I would say the exact opposite of those things. But anyway, yeah, regardless, my point is that for a while, it seemed like we were heading in a more positive direction with acceptance and tolerance and all those good things. Yay! Then, well, I don't know what happened. People started getting angrier, I guess. People stopped being willing to differentiate fiction and reality. Whatever happened to this change in attitude, or maybe it was just that more eyes were being drawn to those games as they started enjoying modest success. Well, regardless, it's all something that I can't think of as a positive. This change in attitude is one that I think has led us to where we are now. That being seeing these games on Steam being taken down, denied access to the platform, and so on. The unfortunate reality is that people, for whatever reason, just have an issue with this stuff and are unable to let things be. For a lot of people, it seems like it's as simple as looking at a game, seeing anime art style, and judging it right there, even if games with similar or even worse content have been rated and judged much less harshly. To me, it seems completely backwards that look more realistic get more leeway than the things that don't look as realistic, but what do I know? I am just a guy. Anyway, I've been rambling on for a while and probably not been as concise as I could be, but the fact is that despite my own feelings towards smut, as someone who enjoys visual novels and someone who wants to make visual novels, this whole whatever it is has been very worrying, not to mention upsetting. And what is the message here? Because no matter how Steam wants to slice it, the fact is that by having these double standards, they are sending a message. So what is it? Is it that atrocities are okay if the characters look more real? That you can have all the rape, incest, and pedophilia in your games you want, so long as you can afford to have lifelike graphics? Is the message that people are unable to distinguish fiction from fantasy if the characters look less real? Is it that people, for whatever reason, can't separate anime-style art from exotic foreign things so much to realize that when looking at an art style, they're still looking at a cartoon and need to judge characters and the content and the ages by the context in which it takes place? I'm sorry, I can't talk. But anyway, and not just what they feel like they personally look like. You know, like how you always hear, oh, that character looks 10, when, you know, in the context of its cartoon world, it's not, and, you know, not like the whole 1,000-year-old vampire crap, but like when you have a character that's just drawn in a chibi art style, but it's very clearly an adult when you look next to it, standing next to another chibi character in the same context, you know, that kind of thing. Like when you got like Dexter's Laboratory, DD is obviously not an adult, but, you know, or you know what I'm saying. Anyway, is the message, you know, maybe the message is just, sorry, we're not accepting those creepy Japanese games anymore. Get off our platforms, you sickos. Is that it? Because, you know, achievement getting, trading card gathering, asset flips, those are all welcome. But any of this stuff, no, thank you. And you know, on that note, while we're talking about Valve's hand in this, I do want to bring up one other extra special thing that's been going on here. Because another aspect of all this that I do find particularly frustrating, even if it doesn't presently involve me personally, is how this message is being delivered to the developers it's been affecting. From what I've seen thus far, and it's at something like close to half a dozen developers at the time of this video. They've all basically received what seems to be more or less the same email saying the same thing. Valve does not want this content on Steam. Fix it or your game is off Steam. It doesn't address specifics, it doesn't tackle what they could change in order to, do that, and it certainly doesn't seem like they're addressing the fact that those games were previously allowed onto Steam, whether through Greenlight or Steam's own service that supposedly was going to make issues like this not a thing anymore. I mean, I don't know about you, but you would have thought when Steam said they would be manually approving games after they took down Greenlight, that didn't mean, as a developer, you'd have to worry about your game that Steam themselves approved suddenly being taken down by Steam themselves. Seriously, get it together, Valve. And for, well, everyone else, and Valve, look, I can understand having issues with fiction. I can understand taking, moral issue with the things you see in fiction, be it games, movies, whatever. There's plenty of stuff out there, and fiction would be boring if it was made to appeal to everyone. But when you don't like something, when you don't approve of something, do you really think shutting down what you don't like is the way to go? That not only makes the environment more and more polarizing, certainly more so than it needs to be, it just hurts the creative scene as a whole. Think about it. Maybe you aren't the kind of person who sees something you don't like and gets inspired to make something you would like, but I'm willing to bet a lot of people out there are. I mean, I am, and I'm sure a lot of the things you enjoy are made by people like that. Whether it's in response to something real or in response to a story someone didn't like, I guarantee you something you enjoy was made by someone who felt that way. Even if it was just at least one thing. And you should not ever want your bookstores or your, metaphorical bookstores shelves to be sanitized this way. To be wiped clean of anything that might be deemed problematic or scary or violent or too smutty or any of that. If you feel that way, if you truly feel that way, then I'm sorry, but you have no right, no place reading or writing or even commenting on fiction in the first place. Your priorities are clearly elsewhere. Which is kind of the thing. Why are those who likely never had any intention of partaking in this content generally the ones who have final say over whether or not it's okay in the first place? And I know some answers some folks out there are going to have, but this has gone on long enough that I think I need to get to wrapping it up. Before I do, though, I do want to address the suggestion many have made and even started to put forward for a supposed solution to this. That being to just move all of these games off onto their own adult storefront. Ooh, yeah, so sophisticated and adult. Because after all, then there wouldn't be a need for all those pesky all-ages versions, and no one would be able to come down on the smut when the whole service was accepting of smut from the get-go. Well, I hate to say it, but while I think something like that might work in addition to Steam, in fact, it might be great alongside Steam, as an alternative, as a solution to games getting kicked off Steam, I can't agree there at all. If there was an adults-only store for that sort of thing, for these types of games, all that would do is reinforce the idea that these games are wrong, immoral, forbidden, that they need to be kept elsewhere. It would say that they're games that don't belong on the same shelves as the games with child rapists, incestual sex cults, mass murderers, graphic zombie apocalypses, and so on. That, stuff like consensual lesbian sex is just too filthy to be near the frickin' child rapists and, insect sex cults. That's the kind of message I feel like you're kind of pushing when you say stuff like that. Yeah, it might work in that those who consume these products will be able to have their fill in peace, but going forward, I don't think it would even be remotely healthy. It just pushes the problem down the road to be dealt with later on, while the greater perception of visual novels, maybe even anime as a whole, just continues to worsen. I don't think any of those things are good. And don't get me wrong here, visual novel developers and publishers and so on are already stepping up where Steam seems to want no part in things, and I think that is awesome of them. If they really want to provide an alternative, and I mean the opportunities there, hey, go for it. You know what? That is a good thing if it's going to be there, and if Steam doesn't want to do it, because at least there's something. But I mean, in an ideal world, I still don't think that is what we really want. For the medium as a whole going forward, I don't think that's necessarily the best decision. It may help right now, it may be great right now even, but it's more like a band-aid than it is a cure. No, rather than that, it's like a band-aid more than it is just taking a freaking knife away from the loon that's been jabbing at you. Simply put, I think what needs to happen is that the record just needs to be set straight once and for all. Or gay, or bisexual, or trans, or whatever the heck you please. Because that, like whatever form of entertainment you choose to partake in, is no one else's business but your own. There's nothing wrong with this content. You don't have to personally like it. I mean, I don't for a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, but you do need to get over your hang-ups and accept the fact that stuff like Nekopara and Hunipop deserve a spot on the shelf as much as any other game does. Or, at the very least, they deserve a spot on the shelf when you have all this other stuff already on it, already getting no complaints, setting a precedent for what is and isn't okay. If we need to protect the children, then there are other ways they can be protected than going after the entertainment that isn't meant for them in the first place. If we actually cared about the children, my mindset is that we should be providing the children with decent entertainment that stimulates their minds and is fun and enjoyable, rather than glorified toy commercials and so on and so forth. Hell, I'd love to see some made-for-kids visual novels come out. I think that'd be really cool. I bet they could be used as nifty teaching tools even. Yeah, I am suggesting we have edutainment VNs. Want to fight about it? Now, I will say, as this was only brought to my attention last night, if there are adults out there using this sort of thing to take advantage of children, well, that's just disgusting and reprehensible on just about every level. I'm having trouble not swearing, but yeah. However, and I do not mean to diminish anyone's trauma in any means or in any way with what I'm about to say, but the same can be said for a lot of things if you're gonna go down that road, and that's, I think, actually, like, kind of dangerous if you want to set that precedent. Like, books, television, movies, guns, cars, knives, religion, no religion even. The implications of that, especially when you're saying it should apply to just fiction and fantasy before we even apply it to things like weapons and basic tools that people use and get injured by every single day. If you introduce and accept the mindset of this thing not being used for its intended purpose and instead being used by human filth to do evil is a reason we need to get rid of this altogether, that's well, I think that's scary. Like, I mean, maybe that's extreme of me to say, but I think that's scary. Also, and I swear this is the last thing, I feel like a lot of people out there who get so up in arms about sex in the media don't realize how much they seem to prioritize sex in media, that their efforts to make the media the way they want it hurts people in real life, men and women both. This is just one more reason why I believe the right solution is always that you should help the things you want to succeed, whether they be projects or people, rather than just go after the things you don't want to succeed. You want more women or LGBT people in the industry? Go help those people! You want there to be more strong female characters? Going after smut and games with scantily clad girls won't necessarily fix that. It'll just get rid of the games and cause fights. You know what will fix that, though? It'll be helping the development of games with whatever it is you do want and what you are looking for, and supporting the games that have that in them already. And you know, you might be surprised by the genders of the real-life people actually making this stuff. I have gotten to know a lot of incredible women that impress me on a regular basis who are pursuing and already making visual novels of their own, and I can't imagine they want to be out of a path towards their dreams because people who want to supposedly do what's right for women, you know what I'm saying. But, you know, what do I know? I'm just a guy that's been drawing and redrawing one character for their would-be visual novel for, 2 months now? And that about wraps this up. Oof. If you have any thoughts on this, by all means, share them. But, you know, if anything, if you've watched this far, I would much rather you skip the comment section. Just forget subscribing or any of that crap. No, don't do any of that. Go on to Twitter, spread the word if you could. Go on to Reddit, whatever. Talk to people, talk to other people. Let them know what's going on. That's what's important here. Because this is not cool. These developers deserve better than this. The more people that hear about what's going on with these games, maybe the more likely it'll be that, you know, we get a response and, with any luck, a reversal of whatever the decision was that caused all this. And apologies for this mess of a video. I know it's probably is a disorganized mess, but between not having done one of these in way too long and wanting to speak up as soon as I could, this is what I've got. Anyway, that, as I said, is all I've got, so I'm afraid that for now this is farewell!